Hi everybody, my name is Sheila Landry from Art Asylum. Today I'm going to show you how to paint this cute little Topsy Turvy bat. He's done in acrylic paint. I painted mine on watercolor paper, but you could paint it on wood or anything else you like, any surface that you have on hand. I'm going to be demonstrating painting it on a 5x7 card. This is watercolor card. I think it was by Strathmore. It might not be, but I think it is. They came in like 50 in a box. And I'll look for them if, I think I got them on Amazon, so I have some affiliate links down below in the description. If you're looking for some of these cards, they're really nice to practice on. They're a good weight. They're 140 pound watercolor paper, and they don't have very much texture, but they have a little of it, so it'll work really good with this design. I wanted to let you know that I offer project sheets for this design. This is the first in my Halloween series for 2025. They're going to be up at my Ko-fi shop, and link is down below. And project sheets are like condensed patterns. For those of you who know me, I usually do my patterns anywhere from 20 pages or more. I do really detailed instructions, but since I'm doing videos of these projects, I don't think that's necessary. So I'm going to offer these a little bit cheaper. They'll save you a little bit of money, and they're still going to have, they're going to have the colors I used, the general instructions. There's a couple step-by-step photos, not as many as I usually have. And most important, I offer this color spot chart. As I said, I use Deco Art Americana acrylics because I've been using them for years. They're a good quality acrylic paint, but you could use tube acrylics. You could use anything you have on hand. With all the costs going up and the tariffs and everything else, I'm kind of focusing my business on things where we can use our own supplies that we already have and focus on that so we could still be creative and not have to keep buying new supplies. So with the spot chart, you can pick colors that are close to it, and because this is a cartoon-like design, we're not doing a portrait or anything like that or realism, it'll work fine and it'll be adorable. So just use what you have. The spot sheets, or the project sheets, also include several sizes of the design in line work. So that makes it easy for you to size them to ornaments or whatever. So that's about it for the intro. I'm going to put this away and we'll get going on painting. To start off, I'll go over a few of the supplies that I use. First of all, we need to have some good quality paper towels. These are like shop towels, but they're not the blue ones. I don't like using the blue shop towels. I think Scott makes them in the big box. They're very nice quality, but the blue ones, the color I found could come off if you scrub on them. So when you do a dry brush or something like that and you have to scrub the color off your brush, I find sometimes it picks up the blue, so I only like white ones. They do make them in white, and they have some different brands of them, so you could look into those. And again, I got mine on Amazon, and I could try to find them and link them in the description for you, the ones I have. The most important thing is you want a high quality paper towel that's not going to shred, because as I said, you're going to be scrubbing your brush to dry it off when you dry brush and stuff like that, and you don't want it to, you know, have little paper particles in your paint. I also use a wet palette. I talked about wet palettes in another video. I'll put a link right up here in the corner, and you could follow that and read about wet palettes. I showed why I use a wet palette with acrylic paint, and I also showed you how you could even make your own very cheaply at home. So you might be interested in that. And we need transfer paper. We need to print out our design. I printed mine on vellum. My printer accepts vellum. So as you can see, vellum is kind of translucent, and that way if I have to replace the design to retrace some of the detail lines, it makes it really easy being able to see through it. You get a perfect placement on it. I know not all printers accept vellum, but you could go to Staples or something like that and have them print out for you. And if you ever need like a particular size of line work, say you're doing a card and you want just that picture on a sheet for you to print it out, then you can email me and I'm happy to send you that. But as I said, there's a couple of sizes in each of the project packs for you too. So what else you can do, which I did, my printer accepts the thick cardstock. When I loaded through the rear, I have an Epson printer, and I printed the design very lightly. I turned it in my software to like a grayscale, and I printed it directly on the paper. And the reason I wanted to do that, I do that a lot of times when I'm using watercolor paper, is when you trace with the stylus, sometimes you're indenting the paper, and that could interfere when you're doing watercolors. So I like to print it, plus I'm lazy, and then I don't have to do the lines and that, and follow everything. So that's it too. So when I can, I do print directly on my paper. And once again, if you need me to set up something or send you a PDF of the light colored drawing, just let me know, and I'm happy to do that. And to trace the pattern, for those who don't know, I do have another video on that. I have a lot of basic videos in my basic terms and techniques playlist, so you might want to check that out. You take a printout of your design, which can be on paper or vellum, and you tape it into place. And then you slip a piece of transfer paper. This is carbon on one side and nothing on the other. It's like a tissue paper thickness. And you put it in between your design. And you can use a pen. My friend Tracy taught me how to use a red pen, and then you know which lines you already trace. It's easy to do. It makes it a lot easier when you're doing a design that has a lot of elements like this, because you kind of can lose track what you traced and not. Or you can use a stylus, and as you trace through, you push down and the pressure will transfer the graphite from the paper to your design. So that's just the basics. As I said, I have a little video on that. That doesn't take too long. If you don't know how to do the regular transfer, then that would be something you might be interested too. So let's get ready to paint. Okay, I am gonna begin by doing the tree, the main part of the tree. If you wanted to do a background like a mottled orange, or a beigey, orange wash, I would do that first. I'm gonna leave my background white because I think it looks cleaner and nicer, and there's enough going on here to show you. But if you were gonna do a background, I would do a light wash, or if you want to sponge something in, you could do that. I would do that before you put in all the elements. But we're going to start on the tree first. We're going to get at least the base coat done. And we're going to use honey brown for that, which is a medium brown by décor. And I like to use an angular brush for that. So I'm going to use my angle shader, and the bark is going to be float shaded. And I'll show you how to do that. So I have my wet palette here with a paper towel in front of it for blotting, because I want things, I'm right-handed, so everything here is on the right side. I keep a small water on my palette because it's close, and then I use this water for things like float shading and that. I have a large water here that I use for cleaning my brushes, because I want to keep this water fairly clean so that when I use it for float shading or thinning paint, it doesn't affect the color. So I'm going to go upside down, and I'm going to start at the base of the tree. And in order to float shade, I like using angle brushes. You pick up a small amount of paint on the corner of the brush, and you blend it in so that the color goes about halfway down your bristles. You could see on the palette how it goes from a strong line and it fades to nothing. And that's because your brush is damp and the water wicks the color towards the clean part of the brush. You don't want to scrub it in circles. You want to keep the heel of your brush, which is the short end, clean as you can from water. If it gets too much paint in it, I rinse it completely and start over. You want your brush pretty damp but not wet, so I dip it in the water. I will pull this in so you can see what I'm doing a little better. Dip it in the water and I touch it to the paper towel just to pull off that extra moisture. Dip the corner into the paint and then kind of go over the palette a little. Don't stress on this too much. I'm going to fold my card so I can reach it better. And I'll start, I want to do this line of the bark of the tree. I'm going to go up the side, and I'm going to hold my brush perpendicular to the line I'm painting, because you want the paint side to the left and the water to the right. So you can see I started there. And as you see, as you pull up the line, I'm using like choppy strokes. And as I get to the thin areas, I'm kind of turning the brush so only the tip of it is touching the paper. And then as I get to the wider part, I put more of the surface of the brush down. And you could see it leaves it paint to a very graduated fade. And I'm starting on the left side and working this way. So I'll be working around this way, around here, because if I started close to me and tried to do to the left of things, it would interfere with the wet paint. You'd make more of a mess. So I'm going to let you watch me for a few minutes. And as you can see, I'm just going to work my way. This doesn't have to be perfect. That's what's nice about doing nature and trees and flowers and things like that. You just want to put some color on it. We're going to go over this with a couple coats of different colors, so don't worry if it's not filled in completely. Going to go up to his feet, skip over the branch, skip over for the little part in the middle, and then keep pulling things down. Okay, so just kind of follow your branches around. Turn your piece as much as you need to. I'm starting on they call that a chisel edge when you go straight on the edge like that. So I start on the chisel edge, and then as the branch widens out, I kind of turn the brush back to perpendicular to the line that I'm going at. So it's really easy to make it look like tree branches. I love my liner brush, or my angle brush. I use it for lining a lot because to me it gives a more stable line than like a script liner sometimes, depending on what you're working on. We're going to follow this down. I'll probably put on some music and let you just watch. You can go through quick if you need to. Alright, so all the left sides of the branches are done. We're upside down. I'm going to flip it over and I'm just going to do one line on the right side here to finish that side of the tree. Now if you're doing wood, if you're using wood, the paint might not be drying as quickly. It's going to dry quick on my paper because the paper will absorb a lot of the water from the paint. So as I look around your piece and see what needs that left side done. Not everything does because a lot of these branches are thin, but you might want to go over some of these thicker branches like that. And notice how loose I'm doing this. I'm not fussing. You know, that's what's going to make it look cute. So I guess you could keep following along. This is a really good way to practice your flow shading too, because it doesn't have to be so fussy. And it will help you get a handle on how much water you're going to need when you float and stuff like that. So don't forget to skip over his little feet. I guess he's a he. Bring this down. It looks a little light. Remember, trees are rough, so you don't need them to be filled in completely. Okay, so just kind of look over your design and decide if you need any more color anywhere. I'm looking at mine and I think it looks good for now. And don't forget, we're going to be doing stuff in layers, so it doesn't have to look good the first time. It's going to go through some ugly stages, but you have to trust the process. So, okay, we're going to let that dry a minute. Alright, we're going to paint the bat next. I'm going to leave the tree like that until we're done with everything else. We'll finish that up later. Just so the base is in, we kind of know where we are with it. And I'm going to use a medium round brush. This is a size 3. And I'm going to start with the eyes. We're going to paint that in white. Don't worry about the pupils. You can paint over them. Even though I'm on white, it's good to give it a base. I don't want to just leave it blank because it just won't look the same if you leave it to the paper, because my paper isn't actually snow white either. So it's good to have the paint on there since we're painting everything around it. So we're painting the eyes, the base of the eyes are done in white. And the next thing I'm going to do are the inside of the ears. Sorry, a truck just went by really loud. And I'm using a color called Coral Blush, excuse me. And as you can see, that's a pinky peach color. It's medium dark. Here it is on my palette. And I want these ears to be soft looking and kind of washed. So what I'm going to do is take my clean water and I'm going to wet the paper, wet the inside of the ears where I want to paint with clear water. I don't want it too wet, but I want it sort of wet because I want the paint to move a little bit on it. Almost like watercolor, but not so drastic. You don't want it floating around, but you want just a little color. And I'm picking up just a tad of that coral blush. You don't want much on there, just a little on the tip of your brush. And I'm going to start in the darkest area, which is close to the head and the bottom, and kind of touch that paint in. And you can see it's traveling. And I'm going to rinse my brush once I laid the paint in, and I'm going to kind of coax it to give a really soft, almost a watercolory look. You could add more paint if you run out. As you saw, mine got really thin, but try to keep it thin because we're going to be painting in layers and you don't want to put too much on. And if you feel you do have a lot and you want a little lighter area in the center, clean your brush and pull up some paint with the damp brush. Okay? And you can see it's a little bit darker next to the head and it fades. So I'm flipping it over because I want to do the other side. I'm going to keep folding and unfolding this, I think, throughout the time I'm painting because I actually like it flat better so the paint doesn't slide into the wrong place. But I don't want it running into my paint. So I'm going to keep folding when I'm facing this way, upside down. So I'm going to add that paint in the corner. And then I'm going to take a clean, damp brush and encourage it into that damp area. And by pre-wetting that area, you're allowing room for the paint to kind of slide over. Also, I find that when I pre-dampen an area, it confines the paint. It doesn't like to flow over where you put the water. So that's another helpful thing. So there's the ears, and then I'm going to paint his feet the same way, but they're little, so I'll probably just use a little bit of thinned paint here. And I'm just going to fade that into his legs. Like that. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is paint his nose. For the nose, I'm using fuchsia pop. Oh no, I'm using magenta, I think. I'm sorry. I'm going to use magenta, which is almost like a purpley color. I wanted it a little bit different. Though, if you use the fuchsia, it's not going to be, it'll still be cute. Because we're going to put some of that over. Now, since it's such a small area, you can wet it or not if you choose. I just put a dot in, and I noticed I have a lot of paint on my brush, so I'm going to take the rest of the paint off and blot it. Kind of just work it around that little nose. And if you want, you can take a damp brush and lift it out of the center. And that'll leave a natural highlight on the top and a little darker area, there it is, on the bottom. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is his body, and we're going to do that in the same way. We'll do the body before the head because it'll give us a chance to practice a little bit. And I'm going to once again dampen his body with clear water. Go into those feet a little bit. Pick up some of your tropical blue. His base coat is tropical blue. I will show you the bottle. It's a deep, it's almost turquoisey, but it leans toward the blue side. Now see, that's very dark, so I want to lay that down and then start to spread it. So we're doing kind of washes for this first layer, which is not the way I initially learned to paint with acrylics. But as I've worked with many different mediums, I find I like this wash effect better than how I learned, because it really does a lot of the work for you. I had learned with a solid thick base coat, you know, a couple layers, and then add in the highlights. You'd dry brush or something like that, add a light in the high areas, and then you shade. You float shade everything. And this is kind of what float shading is, because you're moving the paint with water, but you're doing it all at once, and you're letting the undercolor, the white of the paper, this in this instance, or you know, if you have your wood based white, you're letting that do the highlighting for you and the shading. So you're saving yourself a lot of time, and it actually looks a lot nicer, I think. It's a lot easier than float shading in all these little tiny areas. And you could see there, you could see that he's darker on the edges where the shadows would be in his feet and by the wings, and then he's a little bit lighter in the middle. And this is only the first layer. We're going to go over it with a darker color later on too, so that'll make it look even better. Okay, next I want to do his head, and we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to wet around all his eyes and nose and everything. I'm going to pull you in a little bit, I think. There. And I'll try to stay in the middle. I'm newer to videoing, doing full lessons, so I'm going to ask you to to bear with me a little bit. I hope to get better as I go. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to just dampen the paper. Because it'll just help keep that paint damp enough to move around without using mediums or anything. So I find that using mediums and that sometimes they change the finish of the paint where they're not as matte, they're more shiny, and they take longer to dry and they mess up the adhesion of the paint. So there's all different kinds of ways. Okay, so he's wet, and I'm going to pick up a little paint, and I'm going to start in this little cranny here because that's going to be a dark area anyway, and you can see how dark my paint's coming out. So I'm going to add a little water on my brush and blot it as you saw, and then move that paint. See how easy that evens it out. You could always add more layers. It's easy to be conservative. If you feel that it starts to drag or get dry, just add a little bit more water. You don't want to lip, so be careful on your edges. Keep them damp. Turn your piece as you need. And as I said, when you first touch down on your piece, I find it best to do it in an area you know is going to be dark. So I'm starting here. See how it gives a nice soft base? If you're working on wood, I tried this technique on wood. It works the same. You may want to base coat your piece in a white or like a light buttermilk or a cream color like that. Something neutral and light, because you figure that it's going to show through. And once that acrylic dries nice, your base coat, then you'll have a good clean surface to paint on. Okay, so there's his head. Kind of look at your piece and figure out if there's areas you feel are too light, you want to strengthen them a little bit, which I might do. I might put a little more color in. You can go over it. Just watch that you're not getting too saturated with water. This is very actually relaxing. Now see how it already looks like you highlighted it and you floated it. He's already looking sort of dimensional. This is so much easier than trying to float shade in these little tiny crevices. Because in order to do that, as I showed on the tree, you have to get the brush, the whole surface of the brush down. And it's so hard to go in between these little areas that I just started doing it this way. And I think this is so much easier. So there is his head. Now we're going to do his ears. The upper part of his ears. Same thing, I'm going to dampen them, and these are going to be a little bit darker, so bring them to a little point. You don't need a real steady hand for this. Now I know I didn't wet that first, but my brush was wet enough there, so it should be okay. Now this one looks a little darker. It's not going to really matter in the end, but you could lift up a little. Dampen your brush and kind of pull off some of the paint. And see how that naturally shades and highlights the area. We're going to have layers on, but I feel like showing you this should help you later on with your own projects too. There. Okay. So we will move on to his body. I'm going to let this dry before I go on to the next step. Okay, he's pretty dry. I just wanted to be sure that he was fully dry. Our next step is going to be doing inside his wings. And this is a really kind of pretty look. You could see I used several colors for him. And the way I achieved this was this wash effect, but by washing layers over it. So I'm going to start, the bottom layer is magenta, the same color we used, that dark pink for his nose. And I'm going to start at the left side again and dampen. Pick up some magenta paint. And fill it in. You could see it spreading on the water, which is actually one of the reasons I like watercolor so much, because it's so satisfying to watch the paint move around. See how fast this goes? I am a very slow painter. So I warn you, on some of my videos I'm going to just put music and speed it up so you could watch me so you don't fall asleep. But this makes quick work of things. I tried to rethink of how I painted, and I work with a lot of different mediums, and I'm figuring out how to do things quicker. Also, I like blending the different mediums together. Like I said, making this paint work like watercolor almost is. Whoops, I want to be sure I'm in your shot. It's a lot of fun. Here we go. And by pre-wetting it, then if you, as I said, it kind of primes it because the paint won't bleed beyond the wet part. So if you wet it first, it's less intimidating to use clear water and wet the area, and then you just watch it flow over it, and it kind of confines it. It keeps it in that area for you. This gives such a beautiful effect that I found I can't get by just doing solid base and dry brushing and float shading. It just gives a more natural blend of the colors, and you could really see it's like you're looking through layers of glass. And the key to doing this, you have to let each coat dry completely. Because if you start adding another layer on top and the previous coat isn't dry, then you're going to wind up making it muddy. It's going to mix the colors. But see, the acrylic paint, once it dries, it's dry because the acrylic in it, it will not reconstitute. So I'm just making little areas darker. Okay. Go back on this side, give him a little more color near his body. But that's going to be black anyway. But it'll still show through. And that's the thing, these underlayers, even if you paint over them, they're gonna impact the layers above them. They're upside down, bat, topsy-turvy. Okay, so we're gonna let that dry before we move on again. All right, the bat is pretty dry now, dry enough to move on anyway. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to refloat the tree and give it more depth of color. This time I'm using traditional burnt sienna, which is a reddish brown, and that's going to warm up the color and deepen it a little bit. It's deeper than that honey brown that I was using. So again, I'm going to turn this guy over. And I'm going to do it the same way pretty much that I did it with the honey brown. We're going to start on the left side and continue on. And I did want to tell you, just kind of fade out the bottom. I didn't really put lines for the bottom, depending on what size you're going to do your tree. You're just going to make it fade, or you could put a ground on it when we're done. And I'm probably going to speed this up while I do it because it's really just the same thing I did before. So I'll be back when we are done. Okay, I did all the left sides, and I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to do some accents on the right, no, the left now, I guess, with flipping it over. I want to mention I want these to be lighter so they're darker on the bottom. So I'm not going to do as much as I did with the first color on this. As you can see in here, it gives a natural, if the light were coming from, say, up here, then this side of the branches would naturally be lighter. But we still might want to define, you know, some of the areas. So like the top of the branch, I'm going to go mostly on the chisel edge. We're not making these deep floats. I'm just using the tip of the brush, color on the tip, and kind of just little choppy strokes. That's another thing about float shading. I don't know if I mentioned it. I don't think I did this time. You don't need to do it in one full stroke. I tend to take little choppy strokes like that. So I don't want to put too much paint on this side. I'll put a little in here because see, that's an indentation in the tree, so you want to accent that. But once this branch sticks out away from the other branches, I want to keep this line thinner so that it looks a little natural. You need some line there so it looks curved, but you don't want it as wide as, say, the bottom line. Same with the top curve here on the branch. Just picking up a little bit of paint. There we go. And of course, we're going to come back with one more darker color for the small branches. So we could always add in with a lining brush. If you feel you don't like working on the chisel edge with this float, you could always just use a lining brush and line the top of the branches. But I find that's a little bit harder for me to do because you have to be more steady, and you tend to get thicker lines like that, or I do anyway. And see, like, I want to do a little bit on this branch because you lose the left side of it at this point. So we're going to put a little bit, I got to get enough paint on there. There you go. So I'm almost drawing on the chisel edge with these very thin floats. But see how that filled in that branch? That looks a lot nicer. And same here. I'm not grabbing enough paint. We've had a weird day. It's sun and clouds and sun and clouds. And it's cloudy right now, but I didn't want to stop filming. But I see the clouds are breaking on the horizon, so I should get some light for the next couple sections. And then finally here. And then what I'm going to do is just wash this side a little bit. It's like a very loose float shade. Kind of blend it down. See how dimensional our tree looks now? Okay. So we'll go back to our bat. Alright, the tree's pretty dry now. Next thing I want to do is take some white paint and just put a little bit of highlight in the ears. And I'm also going to add some of these, just a little bit of blue tone in the top of the wings. That'll give it a really cool look and some depth of color. So I'm putting these two colors on my palette. I went back to the tropical blue and the white. And to dry brush, I like using these dome blenders. Now, I think about this set, it was a set of like 5 on Amazon. Again, I'll link all the products. I do have an Amazon affiliate account, and I'll list all the products that I'm mentioning here, so the link will be in the description. You can go there if you want to shop. It is an affiliate. I make a little bit of money if you buy through my affiliate link, but it doesn't affect your price. So I wanted to be clear on that. But the dome blenders are very nice because there's no hard edges. I used to dry brush with deerfoots, which are flat little brushes that look like a little deer's foot. But I find the dome blenders give a nicer blend on it. So for those of you who don't dry brush or haven't dry brushed, I'm going to pull out. Let's go out a little bit. Whoops, wrong way. There we go. Now you can see my palette a little better. And what I'm doing, the brush is completely dry. I'm taking a little bit of paint on it, and on the clean paper towel I'm removing almost all the paint. Now you're not going to be able to probably see this much on the white, but then you kind of just gently tap and scrub. And what I'm doing is the inside of the ears just a little bit. So that part, I guess I went through the motions and you can see it, but you'll see it more on the wings. We'll do that next. So again, this is a different brush. The thing I want to mention to you is to clean these brushes really thoroughly. I use some alcohol on just up to the fair rule, and I really clean them well because the paint, since you're using dry paint, it tends to like to dry in the bristles. And even if you don't see it, the next time you use it, you might get a surprise you don't want. Like this was white paint, and if I left blue paint in there. Sometimes, as you could see, the bristles here are stained. And that's fine as long as it's stained and not paint in there. It's not going to come out. So anyway, I'm going to pick up some of the tropical blue. You'll be able to see better here. And then remove almost all of it, and you could see as I'm trailing here on my paper towel, it's starting to look really soft. And what I want to do is just very light pressure and almost perpendicular. I'm going to pull you in again closer so you could see there's better. And you're just going to tickle the surface. I'm using very little pressure, and you could see the colors starting to build very lightly. This is a subtle step. You don't want to go too much paint because you won't be able to remove it. Whether you're on wood or paper, it'll make it very hard. So see that nice soft, whoops, sorry, gotta get my orientation there. See that nice soft blue cast we're putting in there. And notice I didn't even reload my brush. That's how little paint you need. And you have to be patient with it. It's not going to come all at once. You don't want it to. That's what's nice about this step. It's very controllable. And just, whoops, I'm sorry. I was down a little too low. Just kind of keep tickling it. And remember that I'm going to put black around it. So you don't want to cover the whole area because you want the wings to be kind of a duotone. That's what makes them look cool. But just a little to give it some oomph on there. So that's good. We're going to put the brush on the side. And the next thing we're going to do is shade the body and the head. I'll flip him back to where he is with some navy blue paint. Now that's a nice, hold on, go back again. There you go. That's a nice dark blue. It's slightly transparent, so it's going to give a nice little glow to it. And I'm going to put a little dot on there. I'm going to go back to my angle brush, but I think I'm going to use a smaller angle brush. This one that I was using was a number 8. I would like a 4 or a 6 because this is a smaller area. So this was the size I was using for the trees, and I'm going to go down to a little bit smaller size. Okay, so we're going to shade it like we did the trees. We're going to wet the paint first, or wet the brush, put it on the paper towel, pick up on the corner, and then I'm going to start at the chin. I got to move up here a little bit. I got to move my paper towel over too. Give me second there. There we go. So you won't be able to see me loading my brush, but I'm doing the same motions that I did with the tree. And I'm just tapping it on the paper towel and kind of blending it on the palette. And I'm going to hold it perpendicular and then start pulling the paint. with the tip of the brush. Now remember, there's water on this end and paint on the tip, and the water is going to help you get that graduation. So now I don't want to go right up to do his inside his legs, because if I do, I'll pull off the paint that's on the side of his body. So I'm going to skip around whenever I do this step. You don't want to do areas that are too close. And notice when I'm in the skinny area, I'm more on the chisel edge, though I'm not touching that heel. I'm just using the tip and pulling. And then as I come around to the wider part, I gently turn the brush so that the water gets on that surface and the paint pulls over. Okay, so his two sides are done. I'm going to skip over. I'm going to do his ears right now. The ears will be done, since they're very small, they're going to be done on the chisel edge. So I'm going to go on the chisel edge mostly, and that's clean water. This is why it's important too to keep your water clean. I'm doing too many strokes, but and then pull that line up. Go to the other ear. Let's see. We'll start at the top. And see, even though my brush is touching, it's clean because only the tip has the paint on it. Okay, so his ears are done. Now we're going to go around his, I think we'll go around his head next. So I'll start under the chin because that's the darkest part. And I kind of faded it to the sides, and then I'm going to flip him over. Do the top of his head and kind of bring this line into the bottom. And don't forget, it doesn't have to be perfect because we are going to put layers on this. And you also, for the final layers, have the option of using colored pencils. For those of you who feel like this is too tedious to do the detail work, I've tried these designs out with using some colored pencils, and they're really easy to work with, and they're fun, and it takes the stress out of trying to float shade in these small little areas. So you could pick up a colored pencil of a similar color to this blue and just pencil in the details, the shade lines, if you can't use a brush like that. And then I'll go around his eyes. And like I said, that's kind of tricky in between his nose here, so it's going to be the darkest part. I'm going to start there. And just bring that float around. Making sure I'm in the frame. Doesn't have to be dark. Little too much water. See, when it pools like that, that means there's too much water. it's best to blot your brush. And if you make a boo-boo and go too much on the eye, don't panic. Just let it dry, and you could go over it with the white and correct your error. So the worst thing you'll do is try to rub it out and make a mess. Ask me how I know. And as you see, this eye came out quite a bit darker, which is fine because they're going to be dark anyway. This will get a float of black eventually. So what I'm going to do is go back over this eye. See what I mean about choppy little strokes? There you go. So we'll leave him a minute to dry. And I do want to do this other line on the ears. Rinse my brush. And see, when you rinse and put it on the paper towel, you could see it's clean. There's no paint on it, which is what you need. You need to start with a clean brush. I'm just making sure I'm in the frame. And then bring that line down. And bring that line down. Just going to give it a little more color. Okay, let's see. Okay. So, again, I'm going to let him dry a minute and we'll go on to the next stage. It's good to let it dry in between just to be completely sure that you're not going to smudge. Okay, once our little guy is dry, I want to do the final shading on the tree. This time we are going to only do the right side, so I'm going to flip it upside down again, and I'm going to use soft black, which is a décor color that's like a really deep brown black. It's almost like Van Dyke brown with a little black in it for my watercolor people. It's just a step away from black. It's a very dark brown. So I'm going back to my shader brush again. And once again, I'm just going to do these undersides of these branches. And note I'm using some water to blend a little. Again, it's just the very tip. It's not going to be able to be seen because the tips of this brush is dark. The tip of the brush is the dark black, the soft black rather. And the rest of the brush is water. You don't want too much paint on there. Just make sure when you touch your paper towel that you're not scrubbing the brush. You want just the little tip of it to have the black on it. Start on your chisel edge. And we're just putting the deepest shadows. You could skip a little with this. You know, you could bring the color up a little to make it look natural. As you know, trees are not straight lines. They're not colored evenly. But we want these dark shadows to stay dark. And see how those undertones are showing through. So each time, each layer we're putting on, we use a little bit less paint. Be sure you don't use too much water. You want drama. You want some nice color variations. You don't want to lose all your light shades, but you want some really good intense darks to contrast with it. I find that, you know, my best paintings are the ones that are contrast a lot. Again, you could do this with colored pencils if you don't feel like doing it with the dark paint. Just use a very dark brown pencil and color in the bottoms. I'm going to have some videos where I finish things off with pencils. If you want, let me know in the comments what you think of that idea, if you'd be interested in that. I like doing mixed media because I've used so many different types of mediums, and I find it just makes the job easier to mix things sometimes. Some products work great for one type of art, and you know, like the acrylic paints are great because they don't reconstitute, they give you a good base, but then sometimes like the colored pencils are really nice to have a lot of control and do a lot of fine details that's hard to do with a brush. You know, I find as I'm getting older, it's not always as easy to keep a steady hand like I used to. I know a lot of my customers are like that too. And mixing the colored pencils with the paints is kind of neat. So there, so you can put some dark in there too. Okay, so that looks kind of like a nice little tree, huh? And we will rinse that off. Let's see where we are on my instructions, on my notes. Okay, we're going to add in these little random twigs. Now, I did not put that in the pattern because it's fussy and we don't need it. I'm going to grab a brush. Hang on one sec. Here we go. I am going to use like a rigger brush. And what I'm going to do, I will show my palette for this. Not that it's anything hard, but I'm going to wet my brush. And I'm going to make the paint almost like ink. A little bit of thin paint. And any longer bristled brush, a rigger or a script liner they call them, is fine for this. And then you just go in and pull out some branches. A little much paint. I don't want that much. And what the longer bristles do, they'll hold more paint for you, so you won't have to load as often. Just kind of fill it in how you want. You don't have to go crazy. Do them in all different directions. Don't wipe them like I did. Just kind of pull out some little branches. My camera likes to shut off if I talk too much, I guess. Kind of like Keith. He tunes out. That's the way my camera tunes out. So you could add these later too. You know, it's just kind of to fill them in. Give it a little creepier look. There's no rhyme and reason. That'll make your edges pointier. You know, like that. Okay? Rinse your brush, put that away, and I'm going to get out the small angle shader again and a cleaner area on my palette. I'm going to turn it around. And this time I'm going to use lamp black, which is a true black. I'm going to back off again Sorry about that. And what we're going to do is float our little bat in black. We're going to refloat the body and the wings, and we're going to do it very carefully. And we're not going to cover this whole blue area up, okay? So we're going to use very little paint. Again, the angle brush wet, tip in the paint. I am going to back this. I'm trying to get it right, guys, really. I just want to have it where you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to start at the usual spot. Float his body like we did before. Under the neck. That gets a wider float because there's the shadow of his head there. And then around. This time I did go all around right away. And the next thing I will do will be his head. I think I'm going to do the pencil in for the details on his head, but I'll go around the head with the black paint because I'll show you how to do that. And I'm trying again to use like general colors of the pencils. They don't have to be perfect, and most pencil sets will have black in them. So that shouldn't be a problem. And this really bumps up the contrast on your little guys. So we're going to go around here. And then I'm going to do his wings, around his wings, because they're a big area too. My whole goal in this series is going to be to make this easy and quick and fun. We're not looking for perfection here. And now, as with the other parts, I'm not going to do all around the wings just yet. I'm going to let this dry. I'll pull this line down. Whoops. See, I got a little bit more paint there, but see, it moves. If you get it quick enough, you can move it. Okay. Then I'll go back up the other side. Okay. Go back up the other side. And then when that side is dry, that should be dry now. We're skipping back over. Make sure yours is dry. Going to do a float around the wings. And if you feel like you're not a great floater and want to do this in pencil, by all means, do this part in pencil too. Okay? I'll start here. Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. There you go. I gotta learn not to pull it that close to me. My old eyes. There we go. Okay, so let's back up. Okay, the black floats are dry right now. I want to add a little more vibrancy to the wings and to the inside of the ears. And I think in my instructions I did this after I painted in the leaves, but I'm going to do it before. This isn't always going to go right along with the project sheets, but everything will come out the same. And you can see by my two bats that the wings in that are a little bit more vibrant, and so are the inside of the ears. So I am going to do that now so they have time to dry while I paint in the leaves. So I cleaned off my palette, and this time I'm going to use a brighter pink, which is in Deco Art it's called Fuchsia Pop, and it's a very nice, like almost a neon pink, very pretty. And I'm going to do this towards the bottom of the wings. This is where acrylic paints come in quite handy, because you could wet the area again, just a little, dampen it so the paint flows, and whatever's down there stays put pretty much. So I'm going to just tap in some of the color. And kind of dance it along the edge here. And kind of blend it up into the middle of the wings. Okay? Now I also want to balance that and put some of the blue on the top. So I'm using the tropical blue that we did for the first layer. Now that whole area is still damp. And again, I'm just going to kind of blend that in a little bit here and there. Leave some light areas. Pull it into the pink a little. Let it mix. These two colors mix nice. I might have to add more water here, a little bit. And it gives a very soft blend like this. You could always build more color. It's hard to take it away once you put too much sometimes, but I love this method because it's so easy to build like really vibrant, rich colors. See, that's nice. That looks a lot better, I think. Whoops. A little bit more. Don't go overboard. You want both colors to show through. Go back and forth a couple times. There's no rules that say you only get one shot. And it makes kind of a purple in between, which is cool because the pink mixes with the tropical blue. It gives a nice glowy, purpley look. So because that's wet though, we want that to dry. And you could use your hair dryer if you're impatient, but we're going to be painting leaves, so it'll take a while before I go over it again. I'm going to put a little of that pink on the nose to brighten the nose up. And I also want to put some on the inside of the ears. I think I called out in the instructions for this step later on, but I'm doing it now because I have the paint out. And I'm doing it the same way we did the initial color. So I dropped it in the area I want the darkest or the brightest as far as this goes. And then I'm kind of blending it with just water. See how that makes him really more colorful against the black especially. And we're not even done with the shading, so it'll look really nice. Trust me. He's coming together. Okay. So that's that. Oh, we could put a little on his footies too. His little pink feet. Not a lot, just a dot. Kind of a wash we're doing, a glazing. And what I do, I leave the tops of his feet, the part closer to his leg, I leave with the lighter color. Okay, so we'll let that dry. If you want, this might be a good time if you're careful to just dot in his eyes. And how I do that is with black paint and a stylus. And I'm just going to dot his eyes in. He's kind of cross-eyed. That's what makes him look cute. I notice when I've been drawing these cute characters, the bigger the eyes, and make them goofy a little bit, and they look cute. Okay, so we have to leave this dry a little bit, and you don't want to knock those eyes, and you want that paint to really set on the wings before we do the next step. So while we're letting our little bat dry, I'm going to start painting in the leaves. The leaves are done in 4 different colors. I have Irish moss, which is a nice medium green, saffron yellow, which is a nice bright primary yellow, true red, which is a real red, it's a nice red color, and spice pumpkin, which is a nice warm orange. And we're going to paint them randomly. It's very straightforward. I'm probably going to go through it quick for you. I use my round brush, and I'm just going to do like a quick wash on them. We're going to line these with marker, so they don't have to be fussy. I'm not shading them. They're like a pen and ink style. They come together very quickly. Just little shots here and there. I'm looking for the colors. And red, let's see, we'll go to red. I just made them like, I guess it's a maple tree. They have 5 little points on them. Use slightly thinned paint. I am just going to let you listen to music or something while I paint. Alright, all the leaves are done, and the only thing we have left to do is the detailing. So I'm going to let everything dry, and then I'll be back in a few minutes and we'll finish up and do some details. Okay, I went over this with my hair dryer just to be sure everything was dry, because what I'm going to do is show you how you can detail out the face and the small details using a colored pencil. Mine's a Prismacolor, but you could use any pencil that you want. Prismacolors are just what I had handy. I have the Prismas, and I also have the Polychromos, and my Prisma set has been out. So it's just a black pencil, and you could float shade around the eyes and nose, but it's kind of tight, and doing around the ear is also kind of tight, so it's a lot easier to use colored pencil, I find, and I really enjoy it. It makes it very easy and stress-free to do. So I am going to bring it close. There you go. And all you do is outline his little nose, outline his eyes, my only problem with this is that the camera is overhead. Oops. And I can't see right now. Well, he'll just look angry. And what I'm going to do is just put the pencil on the side and kind of just add a little black to the shading. That's all we're doing. You kind of tickle it with the pencil, using very light pressure, cleaning up my line where I goofed a little. I don't know why that looked pointy. And then shade around his nose the same way. You don't have to be too dark with it. Oops, I'm seeing I don't want it to get out of the frame. I promise you guys I'll get better with this. You could kind of reshape your eyes how you want, if they were a little wide or that. And, you know, go over any of the shading you need to at this point. You could fine tune him. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go to his ear and outline his ears. And outline his feet, because they get lost there in that branch. Okay. And we'll turn them back over. Now you could do this with the marker or the pencil. I'm going to just keep going with my pencil. And I'm going to make his lines And you could certainly do this with paint if you want. Just making sure I'm in the frame for you. There, he's really looking cute, isn't he? And I'll put some little wispy lines on the inside of his ears. Made his curls and make the dots. And then I want to put little hairs on his head. I think there's little dotted lines in the pattern. So there he is. Now all we have to do is the leaves. And you could use the pencil for them if you want. But I'm going to show you, just to show you another option. I like using fine line markers for stuff like that sometimes. This is actually my favorite brand of markers. I've tried them with watercolor, with everything else, and they really do stay waterproof. I hate the thought of, I've used so many markers where I've tried them and they say they're waterproof, and then you put water on them and they run. But the Pip markers by Faber-Castell, like the other supplies, they'll be in my Amazon list. I'll have a list of supplies for everybody. And they're made with shellac, so once they dry completely. And this little wallet set was very inexpensive. I think it was probably 20 bucks, and I've had them for years. And they're very nice markers. They come in 4 different thicknesses here. There, you can see better. And I think I'm going to use this S, the small. And all I'm going to do is trace over the leaves. Really quick. And that will be that. So I will play music so you don't have to hear me talk, and I will do this all lickety split.
A few moments later.
Well, my camera turned off, so I just finished doing the leaves, and there he is. He's just about done. So that saved you a little time of watching. Well, I hope you like him. I think it's fun to do things this way. I hope that you like my new format here on YouTube. Like I said, this is a first project video in my new format that I'm going to be doing. For a while, I'm going to be doing most of my projects like this. The project sheets are going to be available at my Ko-fi shop. They'll be quite a bit less than my regular patterns because you'll have these videos to watch. The videos are free to watch. The patterns, like I said, are minimal cost. You can buy them at my Ko-fi shop. And I'll have supply lists through Amazon. I think everybody has Amazon, so I'm going to put US side and Canada side for the Amazon products that I used here. And it's the first of what I hope will be many, many videos. I want to try to put at least a few a month, a few projects a month, if not once a week. I know that sounds ambitious, but it'll be fun. And let me know if you like doing the mixed media like this, where we do just a little bit of colored pencil in there. I have other mediums that I want to teach too, like watercolor. Let me know your favorite medium and what you'd like to see classes in. I really enjoy doing this loose and cute style because it's stress-free. I like working on paper. Even though I cut wood for, it used to be my living, I'm not going to be able to do that much anymore because postage and stuff like that and tariffs and all that kind of stuff makes it inaccessible for most of you guys. And I just hate to see you spend so much. So I'm not going to be doing that much anymore. But I'm going to try to do general surfaces, paper, things that you have around the house that you can use. If you're like most of us, we have all different kinds of supplies that we don't use. So my goal here is for us to use our supplies that we have instead of keep buying more and more. So I'd rather have fun making stuff than spend my time, working to buy more. I have plenty for several lifetimes. But thank you for stopping by. My full-length patterns, my old patterns are still up at my Toll Painting Design site if any of you are interested in them. And a lot of them can be adapted to any surfaces too. And I have a couple people in the States that are going to be cutting for me. So stay tuned for that. Join my mailing list. Join my Art Asylum group on Facebook. I'll have the link there. And come see in my coffee shop my new things I'm going to have. I'm going to have more technique videos for you on basics like brushes and different like float shading, things like that. So it's going to be fun. We're going to have a good time with everything. Thank you for stopping by. I have other videos. I'll put playlists up, a link at the end here, and you can go to them and see what else I have to offer. Thanks for coming. Take care.